Almost half of U.S. military contingent in Afghanistan will be withdrawn within months. That's according to U.S. media, which cited unnamed officials as saying that some 7,000 troops will return to the United States. Reports of the reduction of troops in Afghanistan have not been confirmed by U.S. defense officials. The news comes one day after President Donald Trump announced military withdrawal from Syria. Also on Thursday, Mr. Trump's defense secretary James Mattis resigned from his post. In his letter of departure, he explained his decision by diverging views with the president. The country's troops have been stationed in Afghanistan since 2001 and have been engaged in the longest war in U.S. history. In September of last year, President Donald Trump said he planned to send 3,000 extra troops to the region in an effort to constrain the Taliban, whose control of Afghanistan has increased in recent months.
And joining us live to discuss this in further depth is Dr. Joseph Fitsanakis, Associate Professor of Politics and Intelligence and National Security Studies Program at Coastal Carolina University. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
What are your thoughts on the effect that the partial U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan is going to have on the country?
I think that the pullout, if it actually happens, will have minimal effect on the domestic security situation in the country. I mean, it's dire to begin with. Using today conservative figures, it appears that the Taliban control about 55 to 60% of the country, which is it's lower than 2 years ago, but it's more territory than at almost any point during the U.S. intervention of the past 17 years. And today, attacks by the Taliban against various Afghan government targets are almost a daily occurrence at this point, are happening inside major centers with considerable ease by the insurgents. So at this point, the military presence of the United States and the international alliance in the country is indeed limited. It's largely symbolic. It has no real effect on the wider security situation in Afghanistan.
Right. Now, you use the word if. Do you have doubts as to whether there will, in fact, be a pullout, as announced?
Yeah, I want to remind you that American officials have not confirmed the reports that appeared in U.S. media. And also remember that in the last couple of years, the administration of President Trump has been known for being quite spontaneous and unpredictable. So it's just a report. It's not necessarily the case that it will happen.
What are your thoughts on the chances that it will, in fact, happen? I mean, have there been signals that the U.S. was planning to do this?
The situation in the United States right now is unprecedented in terms of the chaotic situation in Washington. I mean, the government is about to shut down. The president's cabinet appears to be in somewhat of a disarray. So there is a possibility that domestic concerns will actually become the main focus of the president in the coming weeks. And so that will have an immediate effect on all kinds of plans and aspirations for international politics. In addition to that, the Taliban have not yet officially spoken about this. And it is not known what their reaction will be to this potential announcement. If there is some major Taliban offensive, which we have seen in the past in parts of Afghanistan, that will actually probably prompt the United States to remain in the country.
So what do you think is going to happen, though, with Afghanistan's security and defense?
There's no question that the Afghan government is facing security problems, but I would say that the government's security weakness is not necessarily related to any kind of military deficiencies. I mean, yes, the Afghan security forces are weak, they're understaffed. Something like 10,000 of them died fighting in the past year, but the main problem is political. The president, Ashraf Ghani, he presides over a coalition, essentially, that is plagued by all kinds of rivalries, infighting. There's also a tremendous amount of corruption within the elite circles in Kabul. So there's a sense in which the government is seen as being disconnected from the daily struggles of the average Afghan citizen. So it's precisely that perceived disconnect between the governing elite and the people that is limiting the government's appeal and, as a result, its ability to secure the country.
What do you think could have been Donald Trump's reasons for the move at this period in time?
It's a recognition, really, that the military approach taken by Washington as a solution to Afghanistan's security is just simply not working. I mean, think of where we are today. 17 years of fighting by the U.S.-led coalition and the Afghan security forces, and the Taliban are now stronger than at almost any time in the past 2 decades. It's worth pointing out, of course, that President Trump has not always advocated a policy of withdrawal. I mean, just a year ago, he was saying that the United States is committed to a secure Afghanistan that's free of the Taliban. And in fact, since taking office in 2016, he has actually increased the numbers of U.S. troops in the country from about 8,000 or so to the current state of 14,000. But in 2010, so 8 years ago, the U.S. had 100,000 troops in Afghanistan. But, I mean, this whole effort is clearly futile. If the U.S. could not secure the country with 100,000 troops in 2010, how could anyone think that a tenth of that number today is going to make any significant difference? So the White House at this point has two options. One is to significantly increase its military presence in the country by a factor of 10 or even more, or to withdraw from it and stop being essentially a distraction to hopes for a fruitful peace process. So the president, I think, made that decision to go with the latter choice.
Now, you said being a distraction toward the peace process. Do you feel that once the U.S. troops are gone, that we'll see some kind of a upswing in the peace process going forward?
Potentially, yes. The United States and a Taliban delegation have just concluded 2 days of peace talks in the United Arab Emirates. How far we've come from just even a couple of years ago when the stated policy in Washington was that it does not negotiate with terrorists. And it's also worth reporting, by the way, that the Afghan government had no official role in those negotiations, as per the Taliban's demand. At the conclusion of the talks yesterday, the Taliban delegation that were there in the Emirates said that the biggest obstacle to peace was the presence of the U.S.-led military coalition in the country. So in that respect, the U.S. military withdrawal will certainly increase the probability of a settlement between the Taliban and the Afghan government.